The terms parameter and argument are being used often interchangeably. However, they are not exactly the same. A parameter allows a method to work on different data values. For instance, say we have the method sum. This method has two parameters, int x and int y. Because we can supply to the parameters different values every time, the method body can actually compute a different sum every time. The parameter is actually just a variable that is local to that particular method. We will talk about the scope of variables in a later lecture, and you will see what local variable exactly means. What then is an argument? Argument is the expression that is passed to the corresponding parameter when we make the method invocation. For example, we could be passing the values 1 and 2 to the parameters x and y. Or we could be passing the values of variables a and b. Or we could be passing an even more complicated expression. We will evaluate each of the expressions, and then the values of those expressions will be passed and will become the values of x and y. A very important thing to remember in Java is that the argument values are copied into the parameter variables. The value of a is copied and becomes the value of x. The value of b is copied and becomes the value of y. There is no call by reference in Java. The call is by value. We just copy the values. The argument values to a method obviously must match the number and the types of parameters of the method. Otherwise, we will have a compile time error. What exactly happens with the control flow when we make a method invocation? Before the call, the argument values are copied to the parameter variables, like we said. Then the calling method is suspended. The called method begins at the execution at the top of the method body and runs until the very end, the return point. And then the calling method catches up from the point where it has stopped. After the call, the return value from the called method becomes a value at the calling site. For example, suppose we are continuing the story about the sum method that we had before. The calling method might have a line saying int z becomes equal to sum of 1, 2, semicolon. The return value from the called method, which will be the sum of 1 and 2, which will be 3, will become the value at the calling site. It will become the value of variable z. Pay attention so that we clarify one tricky point about call by value. We have already mentioned it, but let's make it even clearer. The parameter variables are distinct from the variables that we pass in as arguments to the method. Consider this example. We have the method changer that has one parameter, int x. Inside the method body, we do something to change the value of x. Now, how do we call this method? Suppose these are the lines where the method invocation happens. We have a variable y with a particular value, and then we pass to changer the value of variable y. So we made the method invocation by providing y as argument. Remember, this is a call by value. When the method invocation happens, what will the result be? The variable x will be assigned the value of variable y. Y has the value 5, so x will be assigned the value 5 as well. Let's see what happens inside the method code. Now x changes value. It had 5 previously, and x becomes equal to 12. But remember, it is x that changes. That update has no effect on the value of variable y. In other words, when we go and we print at the calling site the value of variable y, the result will, not surprisingly, be still 5. In the examples we used so far, we have been passing variables of primitive type as arguments to methods. Now, what happens when we pass references as arguments to a method? Remember, no matter what, the parameter passing in Java is always by value. The question is, what does that really mean when we are passing a reference by value? What is the value of a reference variable? It is the memory location where the object is being stored. So when we are passing a reference as argument to a method, it means that the parameter will have as value the memory location where the object is stored. The called method cannot modify the variable where the reference is stored, the argument variable. However, it can modify the object that it references. Why? Because we are passing to the parameter the memory location of the object. When we change the parameter value, it means that we can reference the object and change the object characteristics and the object variables. This is a very tricky point, and we will see an example about it in the following videos.